You're listening to NIL Now, a podcast dedicated to the name, image, and likeness of today's college and high school athletes.
So we're going to explore the crazy and wildly interesting world of name, image, and likeness.
NIL Now, covering the latest sports business headlines and keeping you informed on the nation's top performers. This is NIL Now, where the stars of tomorrow are getting noticed today.
It's the Wild Wild West, but we're wrangling it in.
Presented by Headline Studio and Reddit. Here are your hosts, Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
Hey, we're back with another episode of NIL Now, a production of Headline Studio and Reddit, where we cover the crazy and wildly interesting world of name, image, and likeness. And y'all, this is our last episode of 2022. We got some great content for you coming your way. Later on, we'll hear from a leader in social media strategy and influencer marketing, Danielle Wiley, the founder and CEO of Sway Group. So stick around for that. Of course, we'll hear from Babak Hayeri, our Reddit friend. Some good stuff, good content there to dig into. But first, we're going to jump into today's headlines. And my man, my friend, Kevin,
What's up? This is an early Christmas gift.
Early Christmas gift. Yes, I love it.
NIL Headlines.
Well, this is a topic that you've been anxious to talk about. I don't know if you're still anxious to talk about it, but you were a couple weeks ago. But this is not new news, y'all. Okay, not new news.
It's still pretty fresh. You know. Deion Sanders prime time leaving Jackson State to go to coach at Colorado. You know,
it's like the Jelly of the Month Club, you know, the gift that keeps on giving, right?
Absolutely, especially with all the sound bites he's had throughout this time. A lot of people are excited, and there's also a lot of people angry. You know, it's just a mixed bag of emotions coming with prime, but that's been his whole career, though, right? He's prime time. He's done a lot of great things on and off the field, but then also people, because he's kind of, you know, he has the showmanship down pat, people get a little bit moved in the wrong direction sometimes with him, but yeah, it's prime.
So it depends on which side of the fence you're on with that. And so it's kind of interesting. So Primetime, of course, left Jackson State for a Power 5 coaching gig. He went to Colorado. And, you know, I think it's worth noting, obviously, he had a ton of success there at Jackson State. The Tigers went 27-6 under Sanders. That was 3 seasons in the SWAC, won the SWAC conference title twice. And oh, by the way, Colorado went 1-11 last season, finished last in the Pac-12. So I think they were ready for a change. Let's hear from Deion Sanders, the man himself, in his first meeting with the new team. He told the group to hit the transfer portal, make the way for other players. Take a listen.
We got a few positions already taken care of because I'm bringing my luggage with me. And it's Louis. Okay. It ain't gonna be no more of the mess that these wonderful fans, the student body, and some of your parents have put up with for probably 2 decades now. I'm coming. And when I get here, it's gonna be change. So I want y'all to get ready to go ahead and jump in that portal and do whatever you're gonna get. Because the more you jump in, the more room you make. Because we bring kids that are smart, say that, smart, tough.
So that's exactly, Kevin, what you were talking about, that, you know, it depends on what side of the fence you're on, whether or not you really like the approach with Primetime coming in, making those statements. I will go ahead and say this. 13 recruits have parted ways from Colorado's class since Sanders was hired, and that is according to The Athletic. Several guys have already found new places to play, others in the process. But there have been some commits talking about their frustration with all this, because the athletics director said, hey, when they fired their coach, they said, look, like, don't go anywhere, stick with us, don't commit anywhere else, don't look anywhere else. We want to stick with you. We're going to right the ship. And then all this happens, and basically out of the gates, they're being told, see ya, bye-bye now. I mean, how as a player, how do you respond to this? If you're in the midst of this, in the middle of your career at Virginia Tech, and this happens to you, I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, I look at it in a few different ways. A lot of times, you know, especially with this NIL Now show, I try to keep my player hat on, assistant athletic director hat, and then like from a brand standpoint. Those are the three perspectives that I try to think about things from. And then also who we're talking about, the actual subject. So from a Deion Sanders standpoint, I mean, there's just a few words that describe him is I think he's genius in his approach as far as like marketing himself, leader, discipline, likes to have fun, sometimes showboaty, but also honesty. So I feel like anytime I'm in a situation as a player, I want to know where I stand. So if you have no intention on, rocking with me or, giving me certain opportunities, then I want to know, So from that standpoint, I think he was spot on. But I feel like he's also testing the room, testing the guys that were on that team, kind of putting that challenge in front of him. And then the guys that jump in the portal right away are probably guys that he doesn't want on his team. So I feel like that was part of his approach there. The athletic director has to say what he said. He has to say, look, we're going to try to, keep all you guys, don't leave. But ultimately the coach is going to, have to make that decision. So I actually didn't mind his approach. From a spectator, it was kind of entertaining. But also from a parent standpoint, I think the parents are probably terrified or aggravated because, the previous staff has sold them a certain dream and now that staff isn't there. So then when you have turnover, there's a lot of things happening with as far as emotion and uncertainty of their future.
Well, I was going to say, I think that definitely is kind of the catch-22 because I agree with you. When I first heard those comments, I kind of laughed too, right? He's talking about his Louis Vuittons, his
Louis Vuitton roster that's going to be Louis Vuitton.
Yeah, his Louis, his luggage, whatever it is. But and again, I think that's just Deion Sanders. That's his personality. So on one side of it, that's kind of my immediate thought is like he's not really saying like get out of here. It's more like again testing the waters. Are you fit for this? Are you cut out for this? Are you willing to do what I ask? The buy-in, right? Is the buy-in going to be there? And are you going to be willing to do what it takes to turn this program around to find success? So I would be curious to know, because obviously we're kind of hearing more from the players that have decided to exit stage left, but I'd be curious to hear from the ones that have stuck around and what those conversations have been like. Is Deion obviously bringing those guys into his office, sitting down, having those one-on-one meetings, getting to know these guys one-on-one, and kind of putting his arms around them and saying, hey, if you're bought in, if you show me and prove to me you're bought in, like, let's roll, let's do this thing. I think that's part of it. But then, to your point, if you're a parent and you're hearing this, like, you don't want to be second fiddle. Like, you don't want to be, you're already committed to this program. And now all of a sudden you got someone coming in and being like, we don't need you. If you want to hit if you want to walk out that door, go for it.
Right. Yeah, and part of that too is those parents and those family, those kids, they were committed to the previous program, right? So now there's a new sheriff in town. And to be honest, the way that Prime, I think he approaches this is from an excellent standpoint. And if you're weak or weak-minded and don't know how to be excellent, don't really want to work, that's going to show, and it's not going to mix well with his team. That's why he was able to go to Jackson State and win right away, win championships. He was, first-time head coach on the college level, being able to do that. It kind of shows up in his career all the time, how he's, brings greatness to those situations. So that doesn't really mix. So then those kids that aren't at that level or mentally not there, he can probably get some of them there, but he can't get majority of them there. So he's just being honest, like, look, hop in the portal. This is about to be a tough situation. If you think you can endure me and who I am as a head coach with my personality, because some of these players probably don't even want to play with Prime, right? So you got to, it goes both ways, I think. So, but I do like his approach of honesty. That's one thing I can respect a coach for. If he's able to sit there and tell you, look, this is what it is, this is what it's going to be, then that's all you can really ask for.
And I would also imagine, there's probably a handful of those kids that saw that and were like, dude, I want to play for this guy, like I want to stick around. I want to see how this thing plays out. So I think that's definitely it's kind of twofold. Now I'm curious to know, and Deion Sanders obviously has made his name. We've seen the comments, we've seen who he is. And when all these coaching changes were happening here late in the season, the coaching carousel started speeding up faster and faster and faster. You heard all these coaching vacancies come open and a lot of people throwing out Deion's name. Where would he be a good fit? I was hearing, Auburn, Texas A&M, different schools like that. And he ends up at Colorado. And I know that was a school that I guess had vetted him out a year before. How does bringing in a name like Deion help with the NIL space, especially a program that was 1-11 a season ago? You have to imagine somebody like him coming in to this program is only going to benefit NIL and going to take this thing surge to a new level.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Great question. He's bringing eyes there, right? Ears and eyes. Everyone wants to watch. Everyone wants to see what's happening. So like I like to speak about before is that these brands are wanting to deal with people that's related to their audience, because, they were already bringing, brands to Jackson State where he was. You had some of the players like his son. He has also 2 sons on the team. So you have the starting quarterback and a starting defensive back and one of the number 1 recruits in the country all on the same team. So you've got a wide receiver, a quarterback, and a defensive back, or 3 of the main positions who have a lot of followers. So like I think Dre Beats, Mercedes-Benz, just to name a few, were 2 brands that they had at Jackson State. Imagine how that's going to play well and explode even more at Colorado. Colorado being a larger school with a larger fan base is going to, it's just bigger bucks down the line, I think, for them.
My big question now becomes, do Nick Saban and Deion Sanders still do the Aflac commercials together now that he's out in Colorado? I mean, does that still happen? It's
more drama, right? It's more drama. Just think about it's building up. There's been choice words, circling the whole situation. But then Deion still follows up and says, I respect Coach Saban. He's a GOAT. And then Deion is a GOAT in his own right. And Saban has said things about him in recruiting. So it's just the drama that's building up that, hopefully they wind up playing against each other at some point and there's maybe equal talent on the field. I can't wait to see that one day.
I'll go ahead and put this out there. Geography won't make a difference because sadly, I learned that the 2 of them are not in the same room together when they're filming the commercial.
You spilled the beans. I didn't know that though. So imagine when they get together in the same room.
No kidding. And I'm like, okay, are we going to notice a difference? Because I was thinking like this all kind of happened, these commercials, and then after sort of the back and forth and a little bit of the, the tension that arose. I'm like, they're all, and then newer commercials came out, obviously before the football season. You're like, okay, these guys are awfully friendly. I will say I'm very impressed with Nick Saban and Deion both for their acting skills. They do a good job there. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. And again, it's been a fun topic. We've seen it kind of circulating. So I would just encourage our listeners here, Deion Sanders is someone that's a soundbite machine. If you have the opportunity to go back and listen to some of his opening press conferences, opening remarks, I think it's pretty cool. And then, of course, give him a follow on Twitter, man. If you give Colorado a follow on Twitter, you'll see some good stuff there. And I just imagine he's going to have that program moving in the right direction fairly quick. And I'm looking forward to just seeing what the upside is there for Colorado. It was one of my first games I covered in 2019. And just remember, my dear friend Kelly Stauffer was a former quarterback there, and anxious for that program to kind of get back on the right track. So it'll be fun.
One more point. Jackson State, HBCUs. I want to give some credit to Prime for going there and changing that program around in the short amount of time he did and talk to the fans and tell them to get off of his back because he's not going to be the savior of all HBCUs. He went there and did his thing and then got an opportunity to go to, a larger program for him and his boys and his family. Yeah, get off of Deion's back as it pertains to the HBCU situation. I think that he did a great job. So gave a lot of exposure, and there's a lot of things to grow. So hopefully the next coach there can kind of do the same thing and fill those shoes.
All right, let's jump into our second headline here. Interesting enough, Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker was named the next NCAA president. So Baker's currently the governor of Massachusetts. He'll conclude his second term in January. He'll then take over as the NCAA president in March for Mark Emmert. And Baker, he does have a background in policy, will be able to face some of these issues with NIL, the transfer portal, the conference realignment type stuff. And really, that's probably something that's going to be, it's already on his desk. I'm sure he's already doing his part in trying to figure out some things that he's going to want to focus in on and how he's going to get things done early in his tenure as the new NCAA president. So if you think about his role as a governor, as a politician, someone that's in his second term, so he's obviously, got a little bit of longevity and experience there. How does this translate, and does this translate well as now the president of the NCAA, in your opinion?
Yeah, just looking at his background, it seems like he has a good amount of leadership experience, bringing people together. As far as his capability of like legislation, I think that's going to be his big piece. Obviously, when you make a change like this in the middle of all that's going on with the NIL, and for the, kind of the aspect, or one of the motivating factors to bring him in is so that he encourages legislation to the legislators in government. I think it translates well, but also some key factors that he's a former college athlete, and he also has, I think he had 2 sons that play college sports as well, and also a daughter, a gymnast. Yeah, so I think that he has a good perspective. He has to have a good perspective, or one that is at least considers the athlete, the student athlete, but then also governmental leadership and being able to bring different sides together. So it sounds like a good hire. I think that everybody's probably nervous about it because they don't know. People don't know him. They see that name and they're like, okay, well, what is he going to bring to the table? But I think his background seems like that it's going to do a good thing for the NCAA.
Yeah, and I think anytime politics gets involved, I know people, especially that might have a very firm stance on maybe where they fall in the political world, will probably start digging in on his policy and what he stood for when he was the standing governor of Massachusetts. But I do think it's worth just, kind of looking at the scope of things, the broad scope of things, and what he can do to kind of reel things back in. And I think that kind of begs the question, and this is one that, our producer Dean kind of pointed to, and with the different involvement with high schools earning money, with high school players, NIL is, we've talked about this, reached a point where, hey, we might need to put up some guardrails here. Do you think that at this point, the NCAA kind of relinquished itself from it? They just sort of threw their hands up and said, hey, yep, it's all yours, go for it, whatever. Do you think it's too late for the NCAA to really kind of get back into this thing, and for Baker to be able to start to put those guardrails up and sort of maybe even the playing field a little bit more and create some maybe continuity across the board?
Yeah, I think it's later than what people would want, but to be honest, I don't think it's too late. There will be a revolt if he comes in and is heavy-handed in the space. I think that there does need to be some standards, though. I will say that, but I don't think it's too late. No, to answer the question, I don't think it's too late. But I think heavy-handedness would be probably a problem for most people. I think that the schools, the collectives, are the 2 main parties that are probably wanting to have guardrails around this. I think the players are probably happy with where the situation is because there's more freedom. But I think with some of that, there becomes some, irresponsible factors in this. So I think that it would be good for the NCAA to have, some guardrails. But if they come in and try to make it too standardized or try to bring everything on the inside, I think there's going to be some trouble, some pushback from that.
NIL headlines.
All right, we are cruising along here on episode number 9. Let's jump into this segment with Bob Act. Got him for a few minutes here, and these are the types of stories that always warm my heart. Just seeing the pictures with Georgia offensive lineman Michael Morse using his NIL earnings to buy Christmas gifts for over 100 families through the Boys and Girls Club of Athens. Oh, it just warms my heart looking at the pictures that have been tweeted out with him standing with the kids. They're so excited. They're so happy. And just a great opportunity to use NIL in such a positive way.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of folks everywhere, including especially on our CFB, love seeing this kind of stuff. A lot of people were having fun just coming up with cute names for him. Traveling Man 424 mentioned that he's a real life Sant NIL clause. So I keep wanting to call him a San Leader clause, but that doesn't quite work well. But Blue Gunfire calls him a great role model. A lot of folks are having fun, although the way some fans are, they have some folks they're not entirely fans of. So some of the Georgia fans were wondering when Todd McShay is apparently going to come after him for character issues, because I guess they're still quite bitter about something that happened with Jalen Carter and character issues that didn't exist at the time McShay brought it up. But I always say, guys like that, they're analyzing 100 players at any given time. So every now and again, you kind of mess up, but fans don't forget. They never do. But even a Georgia Tech fan thought this was a delightful thing. It's like, is that why you call him a damn good dog? Does that qualify as one? Absolutely. That's wonderful. And I love seeing it. This is the time for giving, really any good time for giving. It doesn't have to be just in the holiday season, but just to see a guy take the money he's getting and use it to make a lot of children happy, and they don't even have to be kids, but in this case, it warms our hearts, because that's something I think all of us out there like to see happen. And not every player does this, but it takes a special type of person to do it. And in this situation, we really have to give a lot of credit to Mr. Morris for doing that.
It's also telling maybe how his parents raised him, or, the way that he's going about things, where you have someone thinking about, during the Christmas holidays or even Thanksgiving, when everyone's receiving, and he's taking the things that he's receiving and putting it back out there into the universe. So I think that's special, especially at this young age, to be thinking about others and not necessarily always putting yourself first. So,
and I think that's really big in this NIL culture, especially because I've been around several coaches this year, and I think last year it was the start of NIL, and I think things have just continued to sort of grow and expand, and we're seeing all sorts of crazy things, as of course why we have this podcast. But the one thing that I've heard several coaches mention is that we're getting into this mindset of like the me world, right? It's all about me. And how do you guard against that? That's not to say that, they're dealing with that throughout their entire team, but basically saying that's something when you recruit kids to come in that are demanding or asking for certain things, you are in a me culture. What do I get out of this? But I think that when you especially get to that college level, and Kevin, you can speak to this, there's so many opportunities to recognize that your status as an athlete at that level can go a long way. And so just being a voice, being a role model. And so this, to me, obviously it has a monetary aspect to it, because he's giving these presents. He's using his NIL money for that, but also showing his other teammates what he's doing, showing other people around him, hey, I'm going to take this opportunity and take advantage of this. And when these young men and women of this status have the opportunity to give back, it definitely is rewarding in so many ways. Anytime you're able to give back to the community and do something in a positive way, it ends up being very rewarding, obviously, for the recipients, but I think rewarding in a very heartfelt, meaningful way for those that are on the giving end of it.
You hit it on the head with that. When you're able to, give, it also speaks to your personal brand. In this NIL era, I always like to think about the branding side of it. It speaks to the university, kind of touches everybody and the values that they have. So it's a special thing. I would have never thought of it. A lot of the college players aren't at that level where they're thinking about, hey, man, well, maybe, I could take the money that I'm getting, that I've been compensated for and help others out during the holidays. That's normally where you have a PR person or someone that's a part of your foundation in the pros that's telling you to do that. So I think it's good that he's on that page at this age.
I wonder how much of that is the youth of it. I mean, the Gen Z, I think sometimes is a little more cognizant of like PR and themselves and how they look. And I'm not saying that people are doing this just to look good, but I think they internalize it maybe a little bit better. So for them, it seems like a natural thing where, our age, those of us who are in our 40s, it's like, I would have never thought of doing that if someone handed me a check like that when I was in college. I just wouldn't have thought about that. Exactly. You need like a PR person or someone to direct you to it. But while I wonder if, again, maybe it is also a generational thing, but it still takes a special person to do it. And that's what we saw here.
Love that. All right, let's jump to our next segment. This kind of jumps out at me. And we've talked about this several times, y'all. Schools, universities, athletic directors, pleading for money. We need more money. If we're going to be competitive, we need more money. And so now the NIL world, and I guess I should say the Reddit world, is kind of jumping in on some ideas of how these schools can bring in more money. And one of my favorite ideas, and Bobak, you can jump into some of the comments from our Reddit fans, the NIL subscription boxes. So essentially, a subscription box, and I've signed up for these before, where you get a swag bag, or you get different clothes to try. If you like them, you keep them. If you don't like them, you ship them back. Or you just get a box full of different, beauty products or whatever it may be. I don't know what you guys are subscribing to these days. For me, I wouldn't mind a subscription to like a junk food box. Like, give me all the junk food, anything you can give me, just send it my way. Right? So maybe you pay $50 and you get some surprises in the mail every month. Does this work in the NIL world? I don't know.
It seems like it could be a lot of fun. I agree. The one thing I started to kind of get from a lot of these comments is it could work as like a light version of a booster club, in the sense that they're not expected to pay enormous amounts of money, but you can get a lot of individuals to give little bits of money and then maybe get some bonuses that are consummate to the amount of money they're giving. While, big booster, you might get comp tickets, free spot on the plane. But, if you're asking someone $50 a month, $30 a month, $10 a month, this would be something that might get them something neat, like an autograph or, some kind of swag. One of my favorite comments was SPC Son Priols. He's like, let's go on full on loot boxes with an annual battle pass. So you get surprises in the mail. Who knows what it's going to be. Is it going to be something minor? Or maybe once in a while somebody gets like a field suite or a box seat for a game in their loot boxes. Or, some people joke, it's like a CSA box. Like suddenly you get a bunch of random vegetables in the mail from your university or something like that. An ag school could do that. But yeah, and it seems like something that might work well as, an App State fan, Rasmo 420. I'd love to see this for a G5 school that doesn't have deep pockets. And, Fidel cash flow, I'd love to pay $50 a month to get special Miami Redhawks access, in a heartbeat. So again, I think the idea of giving people sort of little things, one person said it sounds like we're almost inventing Cameo in the process. Because one guy was describing, like, I'd love to see, getting occasional, comments from somebody exclusive, like a quick message to myself for $5 a month, and it's like you literally just invented Cameo. You realize that, right? But if it works, if it ain't broke, why change it? Maybe that's what it takes. I remember, gosh, this is going to go obscure with how obscure we get on RCFP. Once I paid $50, I think, when all transfer funds were made, to a Japanese D2 conference because they just asked for it, and I got a autographed team photo of this random Division II college football team in Japan emailed to me. And I just thought it was the funniest thing ever. So if they can make that work, Division II in Japan, like that's how hardcore you got to be. They have like 4 divisions. It gets to be 6-man football if you get down to the bottom division, but they have promotion, relegation, all that stuff. All these kids sending you stuff. Why not do that for a real FBS program? What could you do with that? Get some player randomly sending you a message or getting some kind of fun thing. And then once in a blue moon, you get some really great seats.
This reminds me of that toy. What's the toy that the kids get for Christmas that you got LOL surprise ball or something like that? This reminds me of that, because we're all kids. And then, I think, we never grow up. So getting something in the mail, I think something like this could work because anytime fans or people who donate to universities can get something and it's a surprise, I feel like people like that type of stuff. So I think this actually could work. The art of surprise is a big deal, I think,
Yeah, I love that, Kevin. Like the art of surprise is big. And I think that's a big reason why, these subscription boxes have gotten so big, because you're not necessarily picking out exactly what you're getting, but you're getting to test drive something, in theory, whether it's, just try something out. Do you like this product? Do you like, this clothing line, whatever it is. And, I'll be honest with you. One thing that I think is always cool, and I think we talked about this in a previous segment, but like I can spot team issued gear from a million miles away. And I know at Rutgers, basically they did as a fundraiser, you basically can log on the Adidas website and you get basically team issued Rutgers gymnastics gear. And so it's a fundraiser because the team generates funds from that money. So we're getting the apparel in return for that. And to me, I again, you can go to any bookstore, just log on to Fanatics and get a sweatshirt. But when somebody's got the real deal Holyfield repping that, I can see it from a mile away. And to me, that just gives you a little bit of elevated feel that you're part of the team and not just some random fan, right? And so I think that if you were able to provide certain things in that box. Okay, Kevin, so what's one thing Virginia Tech, like if you signed up for a swag box or an NIL box, like whatever, what is something Virginia Tech that you would be like, oh man, this is so cool. I'm so glad I signed up for this.
I'm going to give you a Deion Sanders primetime answer. It's me, baby. You know what I'm saying? If I got something with me on it, then it's going to be, No, I mean, the obvious is like something from Michael Vick or Coach Beamer, Bud Foster. Something that from the top players, some of the top coaches, something autographed, something you could hang on your wall, put on your desk. Any type of swag. Socks are big these days. Socks. But yeah, anything like that that's branded VT that kind of has your, favorite player or theme on it.
Speaking of theme, I like how you kept the Deion Sanders theme alive. That was good. Ballback, how about you? What's something you would be super pumped about to get in the mail?
Listening to you talk about it, Lauren, made me think that there's an opportunity for some of the really cool ideas at some of the programs. I can't help but think of TCU, the Hypnotoad that they started to put on merch. And if they could start making it so the only way you could actually get one of those sweaters we saw the head coach wearing is to join an NIL like subscription box or whatever, I think that would be a big hit. That would be a lot of I think people outside of TCU might even consider it just to get that thing. As a side note, I know TCU ran into some funny situation with that because they kind of just printed it for fun and never really asked anyone at Fox or whoever owns the rights to Futurama if they could use this character. So I know behind the scenes it's been kind of why that merch hasn't appeared immediately. It's like, it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And has anyone bothered, I, as an attorney, I appreciate anyone who goes for it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. But, maybe if it's a limited run like that, you can kind of get away with it. But if you really, because some of these teams come up with really cool stuff that for some reason, the people out in marketing who are off of their own planet think, I don't know if we'd be able to sell enough of these. But there are still that hardcore fan base that would totally go for it. Like make it that kind of subscription box where they're willing to just pay it because it isn't like they're committing to $1,000. It's like, I'll totally, what's the outlet for this? It's easier for them to kind of pay for it and forget and maybe stay subscribed for the benefit of the school. Like do something like that. If I'm doing that, I think you could get a real hit.
So I have the Armed Forces Bowl coming up this week, Thursday, and it's Air Force and Baylor. And one thing Coach Calhoun talked about is just the disadvantage that these academies have because they can't get NIL money. They can't operate like a lot of these other schools. But one thing that's really cool is their offensive line, I guess back in 2019, I believe it was, basically got coined the phrase diesel, right? So diesel is like their tagline. And apparently they went up the road to some truck stop, like, I don't know how many miles away and got these trucker hats that have like these fuel pumps on them. And apparently it's like a fraternity. And if you get one of these hats, like Coach Calhoun said he wants one of these hats and he's yet to be able to crack into it. And it's a huge deal to get one of these hats. So imagine that, if you're part of this fraternity within a position group and by the way, if the price is right, or maybe, like you said, a select few are able to inherit something so unique to a team, I think that that could definitely play out well. So maybe they're onto something. Maybe Air Force could find a way around this whole NIL thing and find some ways to get some notoriety there.
I got a dry joke if you want to hear it.
Okay, is it a dry joke or is it a dad joke?
Both mixed.
Okay.
I like to do hybrids. So Armed Forces Bowl made me think of MREs. So meals ready to eat, like military
Yeah.
bowl, armed forces. That was it. That was the dry joke.
MRE. I don't get it. I don't get it.
It's a bowl of armed forces. What would be the bowl that you would eat in armed forces food? An MRE is an armed forces meal. I got it. But I'm also a dad.
Like,
I'm also a dad, so I appreciated that.
Like,
joke.
I know MREs because my brother literally used to eat those for fun when he was a kid. Him and his friends would go out in the woods and like run around in their camo gear. And,
bowl, as in bowl, eating out of the bowl, armed forces bowl.
Oh, wow. Oh, I get it now.
All right, I'm sorry.
Oh, the light just went off.
You're listening to NIL Now.
All right, now for our final segment, we've got our guest today, Danielle Wiley, founder and CEO of Sway Group, an influencer marketing agency that helps brand and promote its clients. Sway Group has partnered with brands such as Coca-Cola, Disney, and Dove. And through Sway Group, there's an NIL-driven platform, and Wiley helps student athletes with brand building, digital strategy, fan engagement, and brand partnerships. Danielle, thanks for joining us.
I'm super glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit on how you got into the NIL space. Like, what made you guys motivated to be in this world?
Yeah. So we've been doing influencer marketing with Sway Group for almost 12 years now, and I've been doing it for well over 15. So I just said this morning, I'm kind of like a grandma in the influencer marketing space. And NIL kind of happened to us when, we heard word that this ruling was going to come about, and then it did. It seemed like a natural progression for us. And we've been connecting brands with influencers for so many years and have provided tons of educational resources and advice to influencers to help make them more marketable and create sponsored content that really works and feels and is authentic and doesn't feel gross for either party and just kind of maximizes that investment. So it's really only natural for us to be doing that in the NIL space. And as the mother of 2 kids of NIL age, I have a special passion for helping college athletes for sure.
Nice. Can you give us some examples of any like cool stories or examples of the branding things you guys been doing with athletes?
Yeah, we have done a program for, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to talk about it because I haven't gotten permission, but like recovery products. So think like ice wraps, percussion instruments, that sort of thing. You would know as an athlete better than I am. The stuff you put on your body when it's really hurting after you exercise or play in a game. And then also some programs just for commodity organizations that sell products that are relevant to athletes, so that make up the clothing that they wear, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I guess being in this space, I know you're probably, someone who wants to also shape the future of it, but do you have any thoughts on where this is all going as it pertains to the space itself?
Yeah, it's super interesting just watching who's getting the deal. I think one of the real sleeper categories in NIL are some of the smaller athletes who are not as well known. I'm joining you from Ann Arbor, Michigan, so we see Blake Corum driving around in his awesome car, and JJ McCarthy shows up at the restaurant, and obviously they get a ton of attention and they're getting lots of money, but there are so many athletes who still have tremendous influence online, but might not be as much of a name brand outside of their local area, but can still be making thousands and thousands of dollars. So that's just really one of our passions, is trying to get some of these dollars and spread the wealth a little bit to some of the smaller folks. Because what we see in influencer marketing in general, that people with maybe 100,000 followers versus the millions actually get better engagement and better results for brands. So it for a lot of brands, it makes sense to work with a larger number of small to mid-size influencers than just one or two of the heavy hitters. I mean, there's a place for all of it, to be sure, but one of our passions is really those more micro influencer athletes.
I love that. Yeah, and that's really cool. First of all, when you said that you've been doing this for as long as you have, talking about influencers, like it first of all, blows my mind that this has even been a thing for as long as it's been a thing. Because as someone that, I guess when I was in college, like Facebook had just like come about, and then, but now it's just kind of like jumping on with it. And kind of the big thing in question, and we've covered this with previous podcast episodes, how now, your everyday athlete can now go out and do what other non-athletes are doing. So, just a average student, I say average, but just a regular student at school and, has really pretty hair and ends up scoring this awesome deal with a shampoo company.
Right.
Now you're giving this opportunity to student athletes who wouldn't necessarily have this opportunity without this NIL space. So, I think it's really cool. I guess my big question for you is, when you work with these athletes and you talk about the different variations, your top tier elite athletes that are getting all the notoriety, and then the ones that, might be, like you said, kind of on that micro level, what is that recruiting process look like? Are you going out as a group, as Sway Group, looking for them? Are they coming to you? Is it both? How do these partnerships really come together and come to fruition?
Typically, we're going to them. I mean, right now, the space is a little bit fractured. There are lots of different platforms out there that let you find athletes. That will kind of sort itself out, just like it has in the rest of the influencer industry. But it's really kind of fractured, and I think athletes are confused. They don't know the best place to go. They don't necessarily. I mean, this is not their full-time job. They're students. They are spending a ton of time on their sport. They don't necessarily have the time to sign up for every single platform and market themselves. And it's a lot to ask. So we tend to go to them. We use various platforms to find them and reach out through social media. A lot of them, especially the larger ones, have agents and managers now, which further consolidates the outreach. So you can reach out to one agent and hit a bunch of them at once and see who might have some interest.
Well, and what would, I guess, advice to those athletes, especially the ones that maybe aren't at that level of having an agent? What would be some advice to these young athletes as to how to get more involved? Those that are really interested in being influencers and having these opportunities, what are some key steps that they can take to kind of get on your radar, get on the radar of some of these groups that and brands that would be interested in possibly bringing them on as influencers?
I mean, I think the best first thing is to pick a focus platform. So whether it's usually TikTok or Instagram, I think YouTube Shorts are going to be huge next year. So maybe it's YouTube, but pick a platform you want to focus on. Don't spread yourself too thin. Put your focus there, and then kind of take a step back and look at that platform from the eyes of someone who might want to pay you money. So if we're talking about Instagram, make sure you have stuff in feed and are not just focusing on those stories that are going to go away. If a brand quickly pulls up your Instagram profile, they want to at a glance get a sense of who you are. And if everything's in your stories, that's not going to be possible. Yeah, just focus on a platform, put your energy into growing that one. And if there are brands you want to work with, post about them, tag them in your content. You have to kind of be proactive, which again, I know is difficult when there's so many other things on your plate, but that's kind of the standard advice we give to any influencer out there, athlete or not.
How do you charge the athletes? Like that, I think that's something that people want to know. Like, how are athletes paying for services that are out there? Is it, the school, like, just what is it? How is that happening? What's the industry like?
We don't charge them at all. So we charge our clients, whether it's a brand or an agency, and then we figure out how much we can pay the athlete, and we offer them a set fee for the work that they're doing. Where charges come into place are the agents and the managers. They typically take a percentage of all the work. So that's something for athletes to really keep in mind before they sign with an agent or manager, is that commission does get taken off the top of everything. And what that means is that they're asking for more money on your behalf, whether or not you're worth it. So sometimes we find that when an athlete signs with an agent, their rate might jump up astronomically, not really in line with the level of influence that they have. And that could cause us to say, you know what, we can't afford to work with you. These numbers don't make sense. So it's just something for athletes to be aware of. Make sure that you're working with someone who's honest and who's going to charge what you're actually worth.
Like, what type of services are you providing to the athletes?
We're not necessarily offering them services. So our clients, like I said, are the brands and agencies. That said, we have this network of over 30,000 influencers that we've built over our almost 12 years. Part of that has always been providing free education resources. So on our TikTok account, on our Instagram, on our blog, we have tons of articles and videos and resources on how to maximize your Instagram account, tips for growing your TikTok, what if you have a blog, which I'm sure no athletes do now because they're not 40. But if you have a blog, like what should be in your About Me page, that sort of thing. So we have lots of free content just because from our perspective, if they're doing a good job, if they're maximizing their platforms, that helps us, that it's kind of a win-win. So that's always been stuff that we've just provided free of charge.
Love that. And Danielle, kind of wrapping things up, just from your standpoint, you've been in this a long time, adding athletes to the game here, adding athletes to the fold. What has this done for brands and for influencers and just for this space as a whole? How have you seen it be enhanced with athletes now in the mix?
It's just exciting, and it kind of just inserts this level of excitement and creativity. I was listening to one of your an episode from around Thanksgiving time where you guys were talking about Georgia Dairy and how the mailman changed his name to the milkman. I love seeing stuff like that. I think there's so much room for creativity within the NIL space. And it's just anytime there's something new, whether it's a new platform or a whole new batch of influencers, we had the same level of excitement when Gen Z finally was old enough to start participating in programs. So it's nice to get fresh talent in the mix.
I love that. Such an evolution. And it's been fun to watch things transpire and transform. And we know that this is a revolving door. So as you mentioned, even like YouTube Shorts, like right now, everyone's kind of living in a certain space, but different things are going to change, things are going to evolve. So it's always fun to kind of chase the trends and see what's happening. And so it'll be unique and interesting. Of course, in one of our headlines early in the show, we talked about a new president for the NCAA. We'll see how that changes things, if it does at all. I guess one last question I have for you. I know we talked about athletes specifically. Before I let you go, we talked also at the top of the show about Deion Sanders, obviously primetime, huge personality. How much are you seeing, and if any, coaches getting involved in this? Because obviously I know that coaches are represented by, agents and they've already kind of had the opportunity to maybe jump in on some of these opportunities with commercials and different things like that. But are you seeing more of the coaching staff and more people within the program that are on a different level, maybe even athletic directors or people like that are getting involved in the influencer space? Or is it really kind of keyed in on just the athletes as of right now?
We haven't really been seeing them get involved as influencers themselves in this space. Where we have been seeing them get involved is as a resource. They're resources to these students anyway. And I have a niece who was a coach at UCLA in the women's soccer. And, she held a session, just offering up advice on what the team should do to maximize their profiles. And she said it went on for hours. They had so many questions. I think it can be really overwhelming for these athletes. It's just one more thing to do. And their coaches are resources to them and are trusted. And so we've just been seeing that they've kind of been acting as sounding boards and advice givers as the athletes kind of navigate this new scenario.
That's good stuff, Danielle. We appreciate the insight. And obviously, it's just been fun to kind of see how things evolve. And obviously, you've been part of that, getting to kind of watch from the ground level. So we'll continue to follow you. And of course, if you want to learn more about Sway Group and sort of what they're all about, some of those free tools there for that Danielle mentioned as well on their website, you can go to swaygroup.com. You can also find them on Twitter and Facebook, Sway Group. And then, of course, you can follow us at NIL Now Show on Instagram and Twitter, or on Reddit at NIL. Tell a friend, let us know what you think about the show, and find next week's episode out wherever you listen to your podcasts. Of course, thank you to Babak Khairi and the Reddit College football team for their help. You can follow them at Reddit College Football on Twitter and online at Reddit College Football. I'm Lauren Sisler. My co-host is Kevin Jones. A big thanks to our audio engineer, Colin Schmaling, our associate producer, Dean, and our executive producers, Richard Diamond, Selena Roberts, and Scott Broder. Happy holidays to all of you. Happy New Year. We'll see you on the other side in 2023.
Thanks for listening to NIL Now, presented by Headline Studio and Reddit.